The Defiant slipped into FTL speed, its experimental quantum drive humming with a vibration that resonated through the deck plates. Captain Rice felt it in her bones, a reminder of just how untested their vessel truly was. The ship represented humanity's greatest technological achievement, and she had essentially stolen it. 5 minutes until we're officially beyond UEA jurisdiction, Executive Officer Takai announced, his usually stoic expression betraying the hint of nervousness. Last chance to turn back, Captain. Reyes met his gaze. Note your objection in the log, XO. Then plot the most direct course to the Andromeda cluster. Takai nodded, any conflict visible only in the tightening of his jaw. Already done, Captain. ETA 14 hours at maximum burn. Around them, the bridge crew maintained the disciplined quiet of professionals confronting the impossible. They'd all volunteered, understanding the risks. Of the original crew complement of 320, only 157 remained aboard. Those who believed the mission worth the sacrifice of their careers and possibly their lives. Dr. Pottle emerged from the science lab, tablet in hand, dark circles under his eyes testament to the 3 days he'd spent decoding the alien transmission. Captain, I've isolated another fragment. He transferred the data to the main view screen. The bridge fell silent as the distorted signal played, a jumble of sounds that gradually coalesced into a pattern. Not words, precisely, but a mathematical sequence that transcended language barriers. It's a countdown, Dr. Pottle explained, his voice hushed. Based on stellar drift calculations, this message has been repeating for approximately 47,000 years, but the countdown itself spans 800 millennia. Counting down to what? Rise asked. Extinction, Pottle replied. The signal contains radiation signatures consistent with a sector-wide calamity. Whatever these species are fighting over, they're approaching a point of no return. The tactical display suddenly pulsed with incoming data as the long-range sensors extended to their maximum capacity. The Andromeda cluster resolved into a 3-dimensional map that took up the center of the bridge, showing thousands of points of light, each representing a vessel of war. That can't be right, Lieutenant Park murmured from the sensor station. Those readings would suggest ships the size of small moons. Check your calibration, Commander Jackson ordered. Already did. 3 times. Park looked up, her expression a mixture of awe and dread. Based on energy output alone, each of those vessels outguns the entire UEA fleet. A tense silence fell over the bridge as the implications sank in. Their mission had just transformed from merely impossible to astronomically suicidal. Captain Rice studied the tactical display, her scared face illuminated by the holographic representation of the alien armadas. The old burn stretching from her right temple down across her cheek, a souvenir from the Saturn Colonial Rebellion, seemed to tighten, as it always did when she was thinking deeply. Commander Mackenzie, she called over the ship's comm. I need every ounce of power this ship can generate. Push the Mobius drive beyond safety tolerances. Captain, the drive hasn't completed full testing, came the engineer's concerned reply. We don't know what happens if we exceed 80% capacity. We're about to find out, Rise answered. She turned to the bridge crew, meeting each of their eyes in turn. I won't pretend our chances are good, but humanity didn't reach the stars by playing it safe. Whatever's happening in that cluster has been building for longer than our species has existed. If we don't stop it now, no one ever will. The Defiant's cloaking field wavered again as the ship slipped between 2 Tholian dreadnoughts, each crystalline vessel glittering like a city-sized diamond in the void. Through the viewports, the crew watched in horrified fascination as the nearest dreadnought reconfigured itself, facets realigning to form new weapon arrays that pulsed with energy. Their adaptability is incredible, Lieutenant Park whispered from her sensor station. That configuration doesn't match any of the previous attack patterns we've observed. They're evolving their tactics in real time. Dr. Patel nodded, eyes fixed on his biological scanner. Not just their tactics. Look at this. He transferred his readings to the main display. Their actual crystalline structure is changing at the molecular level, reinforcing against the specific frequency of the last Varaxian attack. And the Varaxians are doing the same, Commander Jackson added, pointing to another section of the sensor readings. The gaseous entities are altering their molecular density to better absorb and redirect the Tholian energy signatures. Captain Rice studied both species with narrowed eyes. It's like watching two AIs locked in a chess game that's lasted for millennia, each move and countermove driving them toward ever more specialized forms of warfare. But that level of specialization comes at a cost, Dr. Patel said. Look at these planetary readings. The view screen shifted to show a nearby system. What should have been habitable worlds were now scoured clean of all natural features, their surfaces reformatted into what appeared to be vast manufacturing complexes. They're not mining these planets, Patel explained. They're consuming them, converting entire worlds into raw materials for their war machines. A junior officer from astrocartography spoke up, her voice tense. Captain, I've been comparing these star charts with our historical database. 3 of the stars in this sector are missing. Missing? Rice turned to face her. Explain. According to UEA records from the first exploratory missions to this region 200 years ago, there should be 3 additional G-type stars in this sector. They're just gone. A stunned silence fell over the bridge as the implications sank in. They've weaponized stellar manipulation, Dr. Patel breathed, awe and horror mingling in his voice. They're not just fighting with ships. They are using the fundamental forces of the universe as weapons. Ensign Rodriguez, the youngest member of the bridge crew, looked up from his station. If they can destroy stars, why haven't they wiped each other out completely? Why maintain this stalemate for 800,000 years? Before anyone could respond, a blinding flash of light erupted from the battle. The Defiant's automatic filters engaged just in time as a Varaxian flagship absorbed an energy beam from a Tholian capital ship, redirecting it into a nearby moon. The celestial body didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist, converted entirely into energy that the Varaxian vessel absorbed, its nebulous form swelling with power. That's why, Captain Rice said quietly. Perfect balance. The Tholians build increasingly powerful weapons, and the Varaxians evolve to absorb and redirect that power. Neither can gain a decisive advantage. Chief Engineer Mackenzie's voice came over the comm, tight with urgency. Captain, the cloaking field is destabilizing. We can maintain it for perhaps another 15 minutes before we're exposed. Understood, Rice replied. She turned to Communications Officer Lai Wei. Prepare to transmit on all frequencies. If we're going to be seen, we'll do it on our terms. The moment was interrupted by a sudden alarm from the tactical station. Captain, Jackson called out. Multiple vessels from both fleets are altering course. They're converging on our position. Impossible, Lai Wei said. Our cloak is still. They're not tracking our technology, Dr. Patel interjected, understanding dawning on his face. They're sensing our biology. To them, we're an anomaly, something that doesn't fit their perfectly balanced equation of war. The diplomatic suite of the Defiant had never been used for its intended purpose. Designed as a showcase of human hospitality, with adaptive environmental controls capable of accommodating a wide range of alien physiologies, it had instead served as additional storage space during the ship's brief operational history. Now, as Dr. Patel and Lai Wei worked within its confines, the suite hummed with activity. Holographic displays surrounded them, showing fragmented communications intercepted from both alien armadas, the accumulated data of an 800,000-year conversation in the language of war. It's like trying to understand an ocean by analyzing a single drop of water, Lai Wei muttered, her fingers dancing across multiple interfaces simultaneously. Her neural implants glowed beneath her skin as she processed information at speeds that pushed human cognition to its limits. Focus on pattern recognition, not content, Dr. Patel suggested. We don't need to understand what they're saying. We need to understand how they're thinking. Meanwhile, in the weapons bay, Chief Engineer Mackenzie and Security Chief Jackson worked feverishly on what Jackson had dubbed the stupidest modification in naval history. "You're reversing the polarity of the neutron flow," Jackson said flatly, watching as Mackenzie reconfigured the QR beam. "That's not a real thing, Mackenzie. That's from a centuries-old sci-fi show." Mackenzie grinned without looking up from her work. "And yet, here we are, doing exactly that. The quantum reconciliation process was designed to destabilize matter. We're reconfiguring it to harmonize instead. Even if this works," Jackson pointed out, "you're turning our most powerful weapon into a what? A cosmic mediator." "Something like that," Mackenzie replied. "The radiation from the gamma-ray burst altered their perception centers, their ability to recognize each other. This might temporarily restore that recognition." "Might," Jackson emphasized. "Got a better idea, Commander?" Mackenzie asked, eyebrow raised as she connected the final circuit. Jackson's silence was answer enough. On the bridge, Captain Rice faced the view screens where the alien commanders had appeared in response to her hail. The Tholian appeared as a shifting geometric pattern of light and crystal, while the Voraxian manifested as a swirling vortex of colored gases, sporadic electrical discharges marking what might have been its speech centers. "I am Captain Elena Reyes of the United Earth Alliance vessel Defiant," she began, her voice calm despite the sweat beading at her temples. The universal translator struggled to convert her words into forms the aliens might comprehend. "I request a brief cessation of hostilities to discuss a matter of mutual importance." The responses came simultaneously, overlapping in a cacophony that made several bridge officers wince. "Alignment or annihilation. DECLAR your VC2R. Reyes had been briefed on the likely responses. Both species had developed language so specialized for war that concepts like neutrality or mediation had no direct translation. "I offer neither alignment nor vector," she replied, using terminology Lai Wei had hastily assembled from the diplomatic archives. "I propose quantum recognition of mutual existence patterns." A silence followed, the first break in communication since the aliens had detected the Defiant. Rise resisted the urge to glance at the countdown timer on her console, now showing 42 minutes remaining before their diplomatic window close. When the responses came, they were different from before, slower, with harmonic undertones that the translator struggled to interpret. "Sci-Fi parameters of Rory Co Jinichon. Define mutual existence patterns." Reyes allowed herself a small breath of relief. They were asking questions rather than making demands, the first indication that their perfect equation of war could accommodate new variables. "Prepare to receive coordinates for neutral interface," she said, nodding to the tactical officer to transmit the location they had selected, a point equidistant between the three vessels, belonging to neither faction's territory. "Representatives of humanity will meet with both factions simultaneously." The bridge crew exchanged glances of disbelief. No one had expected the aliens to entertain such a proposal, let alone consider face-to-face contact with both enemies present. "Status of the QR beam?" Rise asked quietly over the secure channel to the weapons bay. "Ready to create the biggest diplomatic incident in galactic history, Captain," Mackenzie replied. "Then let's make it count," Rise said, rising from her command chair. "Because we've just committed ourselves to a meeting neither side believes will survive." The bridge fell silent as Dr. Patel's revelation settled over the crew. Lieutenant Commander Jackson was the first to recover, her tactical mind immediately seeking practical applications. If they're symbiotic, then they've been fighting a war based on a fundamental misperception, she reasoned. But why hasn't anyone else discovered this? The Galactic Council has mediation specialists with centuries of experience. Lai Wei manipulated the holographic display, bringing up the fragmented records she'd managed to recover from ancient data caches scattered throughout the sector. "Because no one survived long enough," she explained, her voice tight. "Look at these diplomatic logs." The display shifted to show 14 distinct symbols, the emblems of civilizations that had attempted intervention. Beside each was a date range spanning mere weeks or months, followed by a single word: extinct. The Novan Confederacy tried negotiation. We continued, highlighting one of the symbols. Their entire diplomatic corps was atomized. The Zeth Collective attempted technological intervention with specialized communication devices. Their homeworld was reduced to asteroid debris. But they all approached this as a diplomatic problem. Dr. Patil interjected, excitement building in his voice despite the grim history. What we're facing is a neurological one. He brought up new displays showing comparative brain scans, or what passed for neural structures in both species. The gamma-ray burst created specific damage to perception centers that process recognition signals, he explained, highlighting areas in both alien physiologies. When a Tholian sees a Voraxian, they don't see a symbiotic partner, they see an existential threat. Same for the Voraxians. It's like a form of species-wide prosopagnosia, Lieutenant Park suggested, referring to the human neurological condition that prevented recognition of faces. Exactly, Dr. Patil agreed, but infinitely more complex. This isn't just about visual recognition. It's about interpreting every form of sensory input from the other species. The radiation altered how they process each other's existence. And no one's been able to correct it because intervention is always perceived as a threat. Captain Rice concluded, the implications crystallizing in her mind. Any attempt to change the status quo is interpreted as taking sides. Commander Takai, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. We've been asking the wrong question. It's not about why they've been fighting for 800,000 years. It's about how they've survived fighting for that long. All eyes turned to the XO as he continued, his typically stoic expression giving way to dawning comprehension. They need each other, he said simply. Even fighting, they're still engaging in a form of symbiosis. Without knowing it, they've structured their war to ensure neither side can win decisively, because on some fundamental level, they understand extinction of the enemy means their own extinction as well. The theory landed like a thunderbolt among the crew. Dr. Patil immediately turned to his console, fingers flying across the interface as he tested the hypothesis against their accumulated data. He's right, he announced after several tense seconds. The attack patterns, they're maintaining equilibrium. When one side develops a significant advantage, they don't press it to completion. They adjust to maintain the conflict. An 800,000-year dance, Lai Wei whispered, fighting and feeding each other simultaneously. But the balance is breaking down, Lieutenant Park added, bringing up the long-range sensor data. The stellar destruction, the planetary consumption, it's accelerated in the past millennium. Something's changing in the equation. The realization hit Captain Rice with sudden clarity. She accessed the original distress signal that had drawn them to this sector, focusing on a specific sequence they had previously overlooked. It's not a countdown to the end of their war, she said, the color draining from her face. It's a countdown to the point where their symbiosis can no longer sustain either species. They're not just fighting each other, they're fighting extinction. And they're losing. A priority alert from engineering interrupted the moment. Mackenzie's voice came through, tense but controlled. Captain, we finalized the modifications to the QR beam, but there's a complication. The targeting system requires direct biological input from both species to calibrate correctly. Meaning what exactly? Rice demanded. Mackenzie's reply was blunt. Meaning we need to get samples from both aliens, simultaneously, before they kill each other, or us. After Captain Rice concluded her briefing, the bridge erupted into controlled chaos as crew members dispersed to their stations. The plan was audacious, bordering on insane, but carried the unmistakable hallmark of human innovation, the ability to improvise beyond logical constraints. Ensign Chen, a quantum physics specialist who rarely left the science labs, approached Captain Rice with uncharacteristic boldness. "Captain, I've been analyzing the perceptual distortion affecting the aliens," she said, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. "There's something we missed." Chen brought up a simulation on her tablet, showing neural response patterns from both alien species. The gamma-ray burst didn't just damage their perception, it created a feedback loop. Every time they interact, the distortion reinforces itself. "Meaning what exactly?" Rise asked, her attention divided between the ensign and preparation reports flooding her console. "Meaning our window for intervention is even smaller than we thought," Chen replied. "According to these calculations, the perceptual damage becomes permanent after approximately 812,000 years of reinforcement." Lieutenant Commander Jackson, overhearing the conversation, joined them. "And how long has it been since the gamma burst?" 799,842 years, Chen answered quietly. The implication hung in the air between them. They weren't just racing against their diplomatic window, they were racing against neurological time itself. In less than 200 years, the damage would become irreversible. "Add it to the briefing," Rise ordered, her expression unchanged despite the additional pressure. "But keep it between senior staff. The crew has enough to worry about." Across the ship, the Gordian protocol teams worked with focused intensity. In the medical bay, Dr. Patel supervised the preparation of specialized drones designed to collect biological samples from both species, a task complicated by the fact that Tholian crystalline structures shattered most collection equipment, while Voraxian gaseous forms dissipated upon contact with most containment fields. "The quantum entanglement sampler is our best option," he told his team. "One drone for each species, simultaneously synchronized. We'll get exactly one attempt." In the engineering section, Mackenzie made final adjustments to the Mobius drive with the assistance of Dr. Oki, the ship's theoretical physicist. "The problem isn't generating multiple quantum states," Oki explained, hunched over calculations hovering in the holographic display. "The problem is maintaining crew coherence across those states." "In English, Doctor," Mackenzie requested, her hands deep in the drive's inner workings. "If we push beyond 83% capacity, the ship will exist in multiple locations simultaneously, but the crew might not remain unified across those instances. Different versions of us making different decisions." Mackenzie paused, a surge suppressor dangling from her fingertips. "You're saying we could split into alternate timeline versions of ourselves?" "Temporarily," Oki confirmed. "Theoretically, we'd reintegrate when the drive powers down." Theoretically. In the armory, Security Chief Jackson inspected the environmental suits that would protect the away team during the diplomatic meeting. Standard protective gear was useless against beings that could manipulate matter at the atomic level or absorb energy signatures directly. "The adaptive camouflage won't fool them," she warned the volunteers. "But it might confuse their targeting systems long enough for us to deploy the drones." One of the security officers, a veteran of the Mars Rebellion, checked his empty sidearm with a frown. "We're meeting two species that can destroy stars, and we're going unarmed." "Weapons would be worse than useless," Jackson replied. "The Tholians would perceive them as an attack before we activated them, and the Varaxians would simply absorb the energy. Our only defense is being unpredictable." On the bridge, Captain Rise received the final confirmations from each team. The countdown on her console showed 21 minutes remaining in their diplomatic window. Just enough time. "All hands, secure for Mobius drive activation," she ordered. "Commence Operation Handshake on my mark." She paused, allowing herself one moment of doubt before commitment. What they were attempting had never been done. Using quantum mechanics to cure a neurological condition affecting entire species. The scientific disciplines didn't even belong in the same category. But then, creating solutions from seemingly unrelated elements was perhaps humanity's greatest strength. Mark. The Defiant shuddered as the Mobius drive engaged, reality fragmenting around them like a kaleidoscope. On the view screen, sensor data struggled to represent what was happening. The human vessel now existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously, appearing to the aliens as a dozen identical ships. Drive stabilized at 87% capacity, Mackenzie reported from engineering, her voice fluctuating strangely through the comm system. Quantum coherence holding at acceptable levels. Define acceptable, Chief, Jackson muttered, gripping her console as space itself seemed to ripple around them. We're all still in the same reality, more or less, came the engineer's terse reply. Minor temporal desynchronization on decks 3 through 7. Nothing over 30 seconds. Inside the quantum reconciliation beam's housing, energies that shouldn't be able to coexist pulsed and spiraled around each other. The weapon-turned healing device drew power from the Mobius field, amplifying its effect beyond what any of the engineers had calculated possible. When the beam fired, it didn't produce a visible ray or discharge. Instead, reality between the three vessels, the Defiant and the two alien flagships, seemed to fold inward, creating a pocket of space-time where different physical laws applied. Nexus established, Dr. Patel confirmed, his voice tight with concentration as he monitored the effect. Radiation patterns are holding stable. Deploying collection drones. From the Defiant's launch bays, 2 specialized drones accelerated toward the alien vessels. Each was a marvel of human improvisation. Devices designed for deep space mineral analysis, hastily reconfigured to collect biological samples from beings that defied conventional biology. The alien armadas, momentarily confused by the Defiant's quantum multiplication, began adaptive targeting. Energy weapons and exotic particles converged on the space where the human ship both was and wasn't, most passing harmlessly through projections, while others impacted against frantically adjusting shields. Multiple hull breaches on Deck 5. The damage control officer reported. Emergency force fields holding. Drones have reached the target perimeter, Dr. Patel announced. Initiating collection sequence. On the tactical display, the crew watched as the drones approached the alien flagships. The Tholian vessel bristled with crystalline defense structures, while the Varaxian ship pulsed with swirling energy patterns. Then something unexpected happened. As the drones entered the quantum nexus created by the QR beam, they triggered a localized effect that no one had predicted. "Captain, I'm detecting a temporal anomaly within the nexus," Lieutenant Park called out, her fingers flying across her console. "The nexus is creating I don't know how to describe it, a bubble of corrected time." Dr. Oki rushed to her station, studying the readings with wide eyes. The gamma ray burst. The nexus is creating a space where the perceptual damage never happened. Within this bubble of altered physics, the collection drones reached their targets. The Tholian drone extended a phase-shifted manipulator that passed through the crystalline defenses, collecting a microscopic sample without triggering the structural collapse that would normally result from any breach. Simultaneously, the Varaxian drone deployed a specialized containment field that temporarily solidified a small portion of the gaseous entity without disrupting its overall cohesion. "Samples secured," Dr. Patel confirmed. "Drones returning tow." His words were cut off as a combined attack from the coalition warships struck the nexus itself. The delicate quantum field fluctuated wildly, threatening to collapse. "They've identified the nexus as the source of the anomaly," Jackson reported. "They're throwing everything they have at it." Captain Rice made a split-second decision. Divert all power from weapons to the QR beam. Strengthen that nexus. "Captain, that leaves us defenseless," Commander Tekai warned. "We were never going to win this through firepower," Rice replied, her eyes fixed on the collection drones racing back toward the Defiant through increasingly turbulent space. "Our only chance is to complete the correction before they tear the nexus apart." Around them, space twisted and warped as conflicting forces battled for dominance. The drones, buffeted by energies that threatened to scatter their atoms across multiple dimensions, struggled to maintain course. 10 seconds to retrieval. Dr. Patel counted down, his voice steady despite the chaos. 9, 8, The bridge crew watched in tense silence as the countdown continued, each number representing humanity's diminishing chance of survival. As the collection drones docked in the Defiant Science Bay, Dr. Patel's team moved with practiced precision. The samples, a silicon-carbon crystalline fragment from the Tholian and a stabilized gaseous compound from the Voraxian, were transferred to specialized containment units designed to maintain their unique properties. Preliminary analysis confirms viability, Dr. Patel reported, his voice tight with controlled excitement. Biological markers match our theoretical models. We can proceed with recalibration. In the weapons bay, Chief Engineer Mackenzie received the samples with reverence more appropriate for holy relics than alien biology. Her team worked frantically to integrate them into the QR beam's targeting matrix, a modification that would allow the device to specifically correct the perceptual distortion affecting both species. This goes against every safety protocol in the book, Mackenzie muttered as she carefully positioned the Tholian crystal fragment in the primary emitter. We're essentially creating a biological quantum computer using incompatible alien physiologies as processing nodes. That's why it might work, Dr. Oki replied, securing the Voraxian containment field to the secondary matrix. These species have complementary cognitive structures. Even damaged by the gamma burst, there's an underlying harmony to their neural patterns. On the bridge, Captain Rice watched as the nexus between the ships expanded, its quantum boundaries fluctuating with increasing instability. The coalition forces continued their assault, their weapons growing more precisely targeted as they adapted to the anomaly's quantum signature. Shields at 42% and falling, Jackson reported. The Mobius field is destabilizing under concentrated fire. Lieutenant Park suddenly straightened at her console, her expression shifting from concern to confusion. Captain, I'm detecting unusual movement among the non-coalition ships. Several vessels from both fleets are. They're moving into defensive positions around the Nexus. The tactical display confirmed her observation. While the coalition pressed their attack, a growing number of ships from both armadas had ceased fire against each other, instead positioning themselves to intercept attacks aimed at the quantum nexus. They're protecting us, Commander Takai said, disbelief evident in his voice. Not us, Lai Wei corrected, monitoring communications between the alien vessels. The nexus itself, something about it, is resonating with them. Dr. Patel's voice came through the comm, breathless with revelation. It's the temporal effect. The corrected space-time bubble is expanding beyond our calculations. Any ship that enters the field experiences a temporary restoration of their pre-damaged perception. They're remembering, Rise realized. The Nexus is letting them see each other as they once did. A sudden violent impact shook the ship, knocking several officers from their stations. Emergency klaxons blared as damage reports flooded in. Direct hit to engineering section, Jackson called out. The coalition is concentrating fire on our power systems. They're trying to collapse the Mobius field. Time to QR beam recalibration, Rise demanded. 3 minutes, came Mackenzie's strained reply. But we're losing power stability. The beam may not have sufficient energy to maintain the nexus once it's recalibrated. Ray studied the tactical display, watching as more alien ships broke from their battle formations to join the protective screen around the nexus. A dangerous idea formed in her mind. Commander Jackson, reconfigure the deflector shields, she ordered. I want them tuned to collect and channel incoming enemy fire directly into the QR beam's power matrix. Jackson stared at her. Captain, that would mean deliberately drawing fire from the most powerful weapons in the sector and routing their energy through our primary systems. The power surge could destroy the ship. It could also provide exactly what we need to expand the corrective field to maximum effect. Rice countered. Sometimes the solution comes from your enemy's strength, not your own. As the coalition forces coordinated for what appeared to be their final decisive attack, Rice opened a shipwide channel. All hands, secure for impact and prepare for potential power overload. Our shields are about to become our greatest weapon. She turned to the communication station. Li Wei, broadcast to all vessels in the sector. Tell them to remember who they were before the light changed them. The shuttle bay doors opened to the vastness of space, revealing the shimmering nexus that hung between the warring fleets like a soap bubble of altered reality. Captain Rice stood at the shuttle's viewport, watching as the quantum field pulsed with colors that had no names in human language. "Final systems check complete," reported Lieutenant Rodriguez, the pilot chosen for this mission due to his unmatched reflexes. "QRB modifications are holding stable, but Mackenzie says we'll only get one shot at this." Dr. Patel made a final adjustment to his environmental suit, its adaptive camouflage shifting subtly to minimize his profile against the shuttle's interior. The biological samples are fully integrated into the portable emitter. If this works, we should be able to temporarily correct the perceptual distortion in any aliens within 50 meters. "Let's hope that includes our welcoming committee," Commander Okoye said, the diplomatic officer's calm voice belying the tension evident in her tightly clasped hands. As the Defiant's most experienced first contact specialist, she would be responsible for facilitating communication once they reached the Nexus. Security officers Chen and Alvarez completed their final equipment checks in silence. They carried no weapons, only specialized sensor packages designed to monitor alien physiological responses. "Remember," Rice told them as Rodriguez initiated launch sequence, "we're not there to negotiate peace. Our only objective is to create a moment of true recognition, to break the cycle long enough for them to see each other as they once did." The shuttle detached from the Defiant and moved slowly toward the Nexus, its shields shimmering as they adapted to the quantum distortion field. Behind them, the Defiant continued its desperate dance with the Coalition forces, the Mobius drive pushing well beyond safety tolerances as it maintained multiple quantum states to confuse enemy targeting systems. "Incoming transmission from the alien representatives," Okoye announced, her translator struggling with the overlapping signals. "They're curious. That's the closest translation. They're asking why we would risk extinction to end a conflict not our own." "Tell them," Rice said after a moment's consideration, "that humans understand what it means to be divided against ourselves." As the shuttle passed through the outer boundary of the Nexus, reality shifted around them. Colors intensified, sound acquired texture, and time seemed to flow differently, sometimes rushing forward, sometimes lingering like honey. "Quantum reconciliation field is stabilizing," Dr. Patel reported, his voice echoing strangely in the altered physics of the Nexus. "The biological samples are responding to the environment. They're harmonizing." The shuttle came to rest at the precise center of the Nexus, equidistant from the designated meeting points where the alien representatives would arrive. As the external sensors activated, they revealed an astonishing sight. The approaching vessels weren't the expected diplomat shuttles, but the command ships themselves. "The Tholian Apex and the Voraxian Prime," Okoye whispered, awe evident in her voice. "Those aren't ambassadors. They're the equivalent of their highest leaders. Or they're bringing their most powerful weapons to eliminate us all at once," Alvarez suggested grimly. Captain Rice stood, straightening her uniform in a gesture as old as naval tradition. "Either way, we've changed the equation. For the first time, in 800,000 years, they're doing something unexpected." The shuttle's airlock cycled open, exposing them to the Nexus environment. The specialized containment fields of their suits activated automatically, protecting them from the exotic energies while allowing limited interaction. Ray stepped forward, the portable QR emitter humming softly in her hand. Ahead, the crystalline structure of the Tholian Apex vessel extended what appeared to be a communication appendage, while the gaseous form of the Voraxian Prime coalesced into a roughly humanoid shape. 50 minutes, Jackson's voice came through their comms, distorted but clear enough. "That's all the time we have before the Defiance systems fail catastrophically under Coalition attack." "Then we better make them count," Rise replied, activating the emitter as the alien leaders approached. The Nexus flared with energy as the corrective field expanded outward, momentarily linking the three species in a single, shared perception of reality, one unclouded by 800,000 years of misunderstanding.